asking great questions. All right. So I'm going to actually turn this over to Seth because he knows our special guest really, really well. So I'm going to turn it over to him for the great introduction.
Oh man, no pressure at all. Yeah, well, I am very excited to introduce our guest. Our guest is Nyah Hardmon, and Nyah is a Cypress Bay grad. So, I know the Bay is in the house, but also just representing Broward County. It's really cool to see people from Broward get into this field and do big things. But the reason I know Nyah so well is because she at one point was a student in our programming, but not careers in sport. She was one of the most decorated spoken word poets that we've ever had come through the Jason Taylor Foundation. And, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that and how that might tie into the work she does now. But these days, Nyah is an associate producer for SiriusXM NFL Radio. She manages audio production, helps shape live show content, supports interviews with top athletes. We'll talk about some of the athletes maybe that she's had a chance to support in that regard. And she's also had some really cool internships and opportunities. I know you have merged some of your spoken word with some of the, I feel like you did a poem for the Washington Mystics, maybe, and some poems for some other big brands and things of that nature. Yeah, so when you get a chance, you can read everything that's in the bio that we sent out to you. But I'd rather just kind of get into it and hear it directly from Nyah. So let's, I know everyone's muted, but let's give a big round of applause and a warm welcome to Nyah Hardmon.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It is. So they should have given snaps, right? We could have gone poetry stuff. Troy, you can kick it
I'll
off
take a
with the
bowl.
questions. Right, that'll work. That'll be acceptable as well. Well, you know what? I just want to do. I'll lead it off. I'll kick it off because I do want to talk about how, and you and I have talked about this, Nyah, in the past. How we didn't even have the careers in sports program when you were, working with us on the poetry side. But how did you go from being this fully invested, award-winning poet to finding your way into working in sports media?
Right. So that's a good question. I would say sports has probably been on like the perimeters of my life. Like I played flag football in high school. I came from a sports family, sports uncles and stuff like that, but I was never really into it until I would say my junior year of college at Florida A&M University. And I knew I wanted to do an internship that summer and I wanted to do something in communications. I'm a journalism broadcast major, but I wanted to switch it up a little bit. And so I was just like, okay, let's try the marketing field. And I saw that the Washington Mystics, which was actually the WNBA team in DC, was hiring for their marketing team. And I kind of just took a risk and I fell in love with that community. Just seeing how the DC community rallied behind their WNBA team was so special because I'd never heard of the Mystics before that, but they have a really large following in DC. And we would do a lot of community events like go to little food festivals or little league events and stuff like that, and just see how the community came and were actually interested in the game. And then they would show up to the actual women's basketball games and have fun with us there. We do giveaways and shirts and that stuff like that. It was just, I was surrounded by people who were actually passionate about what they were doing, and I hadn't really seen that before. And they were actually passionate about the sport. And so that summer, I worked with the Mystics, and I was just like, okay, this basketball thing is kind of cool. I would not mind continuing to work with that. And so I applied to work at Sirius, and Sirius was kind of on the I thought about working there, but not in the sports section. And so that was a bit of a jump. I applied to work for the HBCU college game day internship. And I didn't actually get that position, but someone else in Sirius ended up calling me and was just like, oh, we saw your interview. We think you'd be a good fit for our NBA channel. And that was how I ended up working for the NBA radio as an intern there for Sirius. And from there, it kind of just took off. I really liked covering the game, but more importantly, being surrounded by people who were fans of basketball, but were actually caring about the people who were playing basketball as well and sharing their stories and the fans' stories as well. So it kind of took off from there.
I heard that you said that you play sports and you said that you come from a sports family. What in sports has inspired you to find a career in sports?
Oh, I would say the attitude, kind of like that team mentality that comes with sports. So the bond that you make with your teammates, I feel like you have that same mentality when working in sports as well. It's kind of like a team to get projects done. We kind of rely on each other for information spreading, for idea spreading. You kind of really feel like you're part of a sports team when working in sports as well. And you form this sort of unity when covering sports, especially sports that you're really interested in. It's like you form your own separate little language, and events happen and only you guys can relate to them, or events happen on the show and only you guys can find those commonalities between them. So I would say that team group aspect of having someone to rely on and knowing that when you have to do a project, it's not just on you individually. You will always have someone to help you. You'll always have someone to add a listening ear or just parts of knowledge that you may have forgotten, that they'll always be there to help. So I think that's the number one thing.
What does your typical day look like? Just kind of describe what your typical day look like to our students.
Right. So a typical day, I'm a producer for NFL radio, but I've been working on Mad Dog Sports Radio as well. So let's say I'm doing a show on Mad Dog Sports Radio. We have late night shows. So I go in about 6 p.m. at night. But before the show even starts, I gather a bunch of audio clips or any sports news that would have happened during the day. I gather them all on a sheet and send it to the hosts just so that they have an idea of trending topics, trending events of the week. So I'll go on YouTube to look at stuff. We have this whole database of a bunch of news clips at Sirius. So I'll just search through that. It also has to do with what your host likes covering. So my host likes college football, NFL. So I'll look mainly on those clips, what's going on with college football. There have been some pretty big stories with that lately. And then NFL, if there were a game the night before, I'll get some sound bites from press conferences from there and just give them an idea of what's going on. And then I'll send that out. A couple hours later, I'll go into the studio and set up all of the equipment. So a lot of our hosts are actually not in studio after the pandemic. Sirius took a lot of hosts from across the country. So my host for one of my shows is actually in California, but we have this really cool equipment where he can just connect to a microphone and it connects directly to our studio. So we'll usually make sure he's set up about 30 minutes before the show starts, just test his sound levels, make sure he does some tests make sure his vocals are all right. And then he will give a general idea if he wants to use any audio, then he'll let me know that. He will tell me stuff like that. Also, before the show starts, I'll have to call into the control center, just make sure all of the routings are correctly, make sure we'll actually go on air during the time. That's been a little bit of an issue where the routings have been at different studios. So we'll think we're going on air and it's just complete silence. Or another studio will think they're not on air and they'll just be talking. So just making sure that we're actually going on air when we think we're going on air. Before the show, I'll also get my songs ready. Every time we come back from a commercial, we play a song. And so I like to have fun. If there's like a trending topic or if it's like a holiday, I'll maybe do songs that have to do with that holiday, Christmas music, just have fun with stuff like that. And yeah, that's about the pre-show work. And then the show starts. And my main responsibilities are just controlling that the host actually gets on air. So turning his mic on and off during the breaks, playing songs when he wants it, playing audio clips when he wants it. If there is a trending topic or a news story that breaks while we're on air, then sometimes I'll record clips from that so that he'll have it to break it while we're on air as well. And then I'll also make sure that we're firing the breaks, so promos and that stuff. Sometimes the host will actually have to read promos or advertisements, so I'll send them the scripts for that, just a little in between stuff. And yeah, we just record the show, and afterwards we make sure it's all saved. We make sure it's uploaded to the app, and that's about a typical show.
Troy, I see there's a question in the chat from Hollywood Hills. They wanted to know if you work
Yes.
from home, remotely, or in the studio. It sounds like you said you do go into the studio at some point. So are you primarily in the studio or are you ever working from home?
I am primarily in the studio, but there are producers that are able to work from home. You have to get like a whole audio setup where you can set it up in your house. You have to have really good Wi-Fi to make sure that you don't have any outages while you're on air. And so that is an option, but I prefer being in the studio just because their equipment is probably better than the ones that they'll send to your home. And I just feel like there's less of a chance of things going wrong. I will say throughout the week, I do have other duties that I work from home. For example, I ingest NFL audio clips or NFL interviews from throughout the week. So stuff like that I can do from home. But for the actual live shows, I'm in studio for those.
All right. Good question.
Now you talked about being down there with the Mystics and how much they're how much they're loved by the community. What is it like to cover an event like the WNBA Championship Parade?
So that was actually a really cool event I got to cover last year when the New York Liberty won. And I feel like we're in a really cool spot with the WNBA where it's receiving a lot more press coverage, a lot more media coverage than it has in the past. So it was for a show called The Starting Lineup on NBA Radio with Brian Scalabrine and Frank Isola. And they were two hosts that I had worked with when I was an intern. So we kind of built that relationship. And so when I came back, they were really thrilled to give me opportunities to speak on air and do different stuff besides just doing the typical show reports. And so when the New York Liberty won and the parade was happening, I just happened to mention, oh, that's happening right across the street from my apartment. And they
Mm.
were like, Naya, you should go cover it. And I thought they were joking. They were not. And so I got up really quickly. Mind you, this is a 6 a.m. show. So it was like 7, 8 in the morning at this point. And I took my little microphone and I just went out there and I did little man on the street interviews. So they actually called into me. And so I was put on air and then they could hear little audio clips from that. I remember I interviewed someone who was a Mystics fan or a Liberty fan for like the past 10 years, had been waiting for that moment to happen, drove in from Jersey. There was another person who actually worked at the arena that the Liberty played. So she was super excited about it. And it was just really cool to see people show up for the city. They were really proud of what the city had done, and I was really cool that I was able to capture that on air.
Now, I know you were talking about Brian Calabrini and those type of personalities. What is it like to work for a guy like Christopher Mad Dog Russo?
Right. So there are a lot of interesting personalities in sports. Chris Russo, he is a really cool guy because he is the exact same as he is on air, off air. So you kind of know what you're getting. He's a bit of a wilder personality, but also it's really cool to learn the different host quirks. So Chris really likes history. Every time I see him, he will recommend like a history documentary or a history book to read. So it's cool to just know how to relate to them on that end. I know if I see anything history related, or he was really into Timothy Chalamet at one point. So if anything, I had any Timothy news, I would talk to him about that. So he is actually not the worst to work with. It's interesting to know which hosts, how they like their shows to be done. So Chris, he doesn't like music's coming back from his rejoins. He'll just do live. So you'll have to count him in and then he'll just start talking. And then at the end of his shows, he's probably one of the hosts that just lets the music play for the longest to end it. Usually we have like 30 seconds of music to end the show. He'll do like 2 minutes of a song. So just knowing how his show likes to roll. It also definitely depends on the channel. I will say NBA radio, working with those hosts is probably more akin to talking to like your uncles in a barber shop. You kind of have to have a little bit more tougher skin. They will get at you a little bit more. I worked with an NBA player, Rick Mahorn, who used to play for the Pistons. Yes, and the first time I worked with him, he basically hazed me about the school I went to for about 30 seconds because he went to a rival school. But I think that was his way of trying to relate, and you just kind of have to brush it off. There's another personality on NBA radio, Sam Mitchell, who I would say is a bit of you can't really, you know which host you can talk to during break and which host you kind of have to just let do their thing. I remember I was working a show and he was clipping his nails all through the break. and you can hear it, and then you can kind of hear it on air. And one of the producers tried to say something, and it was not taken well. So we just have to learn how to edit around the toe clipping or edit around the nail clipping. So it's just learning the different quirks of people and learning what you can control. You don't want to pick a battle with hosts. At the end of the day, you have to respect the boundaries. They are the hosts, you are the producers. So just learning that if they want to clip their nails during a show, or if they want to talk about this or that during a show, you just have to let them roll. So it really depends.
So, Nyah, as hearing you talk about all of this and really kind of the behind the scenes that it takes for these shows to exist, and then you're a person who at one point was the performer. You were the person out on stage on the microphone performing your poems or whatever. Has it been an adjustment for you to take, I hate to say a back seat because your job is every bit as important, or else it doesn't, the show doesn't get out on air, as you told us about earlier. But has that been an adjustment for you from a mindset set perspective to not be the person that is out front?
Right. I would say that it was definitely adjustment when I first started. I remember one of the producers training me, taught me a piece of advice, which was just that when you're a producer, just stick to your producer roles, at least at first. Don't worry about trying to talk to the host, trying to get on air, any of that stuff. Just stick to actually doing your job well, and then the host will open up to you and open up different opportunities. So when I first started, I would just do my little cues, like 30 seconds and break, 1 minute and break. That's it. And then as you start to build relationships with the host, they actually will sometimes invite you on air to talk. And that was actually more of an adjustment because I was used to being behind the scenes. I was used to just doing the little things. So sometimes when they invite you on air to talk, it's just like, what am I going to say? How are you going to say this? And you have to remember that a bunch of people are listening too. So I kind of prefer most times being behind the scenes for most shows, it's unless it's like a point where it makes sense for the producers to talk. There's a show on the weekends that I do on Mad Dog Sports Radio, and it's all about college football. And we have a segment called Childers versus the World, where it's the host, Chris Childers, versus a bunch of different topics. And so he will invite me on air to talk about different trending topics, and then he'll answer and react to that. So that one kind of makes more sense. But if it's just like a random, you're just trying to get your 30 seconds of airtime, a lot of times you just want to stick to doing the job, and then the other stuff will come.
Makes sense. Troy, we have another question in the chat, also from Hollywood Hills. They want to know, what is the most difficult aspect of your job?
Most difficult aspect is dealing with unexpected things that will come up during a live show. Mostly that has to do with technology. A couple times this year, the host that I work with, he hosts a show by himself for 3 hours. And for the first time, his connection just dropped right in the middle of a show or right in the beginning of a show. And usually when there's two hosts going on, then you can just have the other host jump on and fill in. But this was a situation where there was no one else to fill in. And there's a certain amount of period, I think it's like 10 seconds, 15 seconds of silence, that if that happens, it triggers an alarm. And so the actual radio station will play like you are now experiencing disruptions, which is my
Oh
worst
man.
nightmare to happen. And
Yeah.
so just learning how to react to those situations where if a host does drop, knowing to go to break immediately or play a promo immediately, but then also knowing that you only have two more breaks left or one more break left. So what you're going to do then. So learning how to react to those situations on the fly, knowing it's live programming too, so you can't just go back and edit it all the time because there'll be a certain amount of listeners who are listening to it at that time. That was probably the biggest adjustment. And then that also relies on asking other people for help. So if you do know a host that you know that they maybe not be busy at the time, that they can jump on and cover for you, and using the relationships like that. But I would say that was the biggest thing, just reacting on the fly and what to do when things go wrong.
I know stepping into this type of business, especially being an associate producer, do you have a mentor? And then what was the best piece of advice someone's given you about working in sports?
So I would say I have a bunch of different mentors or people who have just given me advice throughout this journey. I was part of an organization called the Black Sports Business Professionals, and that was really cool. It was founded by this guy named Vince Pearson, and we went to a bunch of little events, like we worked with the Jaguars, we went to this Black Sports Business Symposium in Atlanta, and one of the biggest things he told me was working in sports is what you may think is right for you, the role that you may think is right for you, your actual role may be something that's right next door or two doors down. So to not be particularly closed in on one career path that you think is the perfect career path for you, and not to be so closed off to something that may be similar to that path or adjacent to that path, and just be open to trying new skills as well. Not to be so closed off to trying other things in sports, because a lot of times they're all connected, or someone who works in this department will know someone who works in that department. So if you're working in somewhere, just be open to maybe making a switch or maybe switching it up and seeing what else you can do.
I like that.
I think
I
we
like
do
that
have
advice
another
a lot.
question in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Is it hard to adjust from performing to being behind the scenes?
So similarly, it is a bit of an adjustment, but not as much. I also think it helps because I consider my work, not really a performance. So I don't really go into work thinking with the attitude of how can I have my voice heard today or how can I perform today. I go into work thinking how can we make good audio content or how can we make a good sports story today. So I think adjusting that mindset and realizing that if I do want to go on air or if that does want to be the focus, if I do want to perform, then that will be a different time and a different place. So you don't really have to be sad that you're behind the scenes when you know that you're also integral in making the show work, and the host is the host for a reason. And if you do express that you want to be on air or you want to perform, they'll help you out and they'll give you those opportunities as well. But I think it's also cool to realize that you don't have to be in the spotlight all the time. You can be making sure that the host shines and making sure that that sounds all right.
Naya, you're probably I'm thinking of the last handful of people we've had in this role as a guest speaker. You're probably the, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of them are so far removed from where our students are right now. But you said 2019, which for them might seem a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. And so you kind of very quickly, from the time you graduated high school, have started this career in sports, working at a very high level. What advice would you give to our students, particularly maybe our seniors who are about to go to school and start this journey of maybe pursuing a career in sports?
So don't be scared to make relationships with people who are maybe in roles that you can see yourself wanting to be in. I feel like that helped a lot. With the roles that I'm in now, it was helped by people who gave me or gave someone a good word about me or kind of helped me see what the job would be like because they were already in the role themselves. So if you have an idea of people who are working a job or in a field that you think would be pretty cool, don't be scared to ask them to talk or ask if you could shadow them for a little bit or just see the actual day to day and see what it would actually be like. And then that will also help you decide if this is actually something that you want to pursue as well. So I would say don't be scared to make relationships with people within the sports industry. And also try to look for sports positions that are a bit out of the box. I feel like we all know the sports broadcasters, the sports photographers, but sometimes it's pretty cool to look into like the sports sales positions or different sports marketing positions, because there really are a lot of different factors at work to make the sports industry go. So I would say think outside the box a little bit and think about other things or things that you may be good at. How could you apply that to the sports world?
I love that, Troy. It's not dissimilar from what Isabel Mazza just told us in a previous one.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I was going to ask her a question. I was going to kind of preface that. We had a great storyteller on a couple last month, in Isabel Maza. She's working for a women's soccer team here in Florida, and she talked about being a great storyteller. What are the qualities of being a great storyteller in your business?
Hmm. That's a good question because I feel like, especially in sports, you hear the same generic storylines retold a bunch of different ways. So it really is focusing on how to stick out. And I would say, first and foremost, focus on the details of how you can bring the listeners directly into the story that you're telling. So whether that's like the stereotypical sights, the smells, the different descriptors like that. But the best stories that I've heard are the ones that people make personal. So how can you relate to this big, huge sports topic? How can you narrow it down and relate it to yourself? I think that those are really, really, really fascinating. I remember during this past World Series run, we were covering the Dodgers, and one of the hosts, it was during one of the games where the Dodgers were like pulling out their bullpen. They were pulling pitchers from like that no one had heard of. And there was this no-name pitcher that barely anyone had heard of. And the host told a story about how he actually had heard of that pitcher because years ago, he went to a baseball game, he was on a date with a girl, and that pitcher was debuting for the first time. And somehow, some way, the person that he went on a date with got a DM from that pitcher after the game, like, you should hang with me, you should party with me, I see you in the crowd. And she ended up leaving him and going to the pitcher. So, like, little stories like that of a pitcher that literally no one heard of, but this host happened to have an experience with him from years and
Oh
years and years
God.
I'll
ago.
never forget them.
He'll never forget. And we got like tons of calls of listeners reacting to that story. Like, that is a crazy story. And he didn't even say the name, but listeners were able to like deduct the details and get down to it. So it's just like little human interest, little human features of this bigger story. How are you able to break it down and make it personal and also unique to what you've been through?
Yeah, a little grimy. So there's two questions in the chat. I'm going to tell you the second question so you have a moment to think about it, and then I'll ask you the first question. So the second question is from BBN, Piper High School. Do you have a poem that is sports related? And if you do, would you be able to share it here with the group?
Oh, okay.
So you can think about that or scroll through the phone and see what you have in your catalog, and let us know about that one. And then the question from Hollywood Hills: when and how did you know that this was what you wanted to do?
Well, that's a good question because I always kind of knew that I wanted to work in maybe the music entertainment industry. When I first started studying journalism, I thought I wanted to be a music journalist. So I interned with Universal Music Group, Amazon Music, Beats by Dre. And that was cool, but the more that I worked in those spaces, it kind of seemed like a little disingenuine. A lot of executives who were trying to guess the next trends or guess what younger people wanted to listen to or guess the next TikTok trend. And a lot of people who were in it for their own self-interest rather than for the betterment of the industry. And so Sirius was always like in the back of my mind, but more in the music side. But when I started working in the sports side of it, I found that people were actually a lot more passionate about what they were covering. I think the special thing about working in sports is that you're working with a bunch of sports fans. And so they would have been watching the games anyways. They would have been following the athletes anyways. So that the fact that they have the opportunity to actually work with this thing that they've grown up with, that they're already a fan with, you can see in the quality of the work because you can see that they actually pay more detail and pay more attention to what they're covering versus trying to guess what people would think or guess what people would like. So I think that's what really attracted me into working into sports. And then at Sirius, it was the perfect combination between music and entertainment and sports because I am still surrounded by music, still surrounded by musicians, that entertainment aspect. But then I also get to add sports into it as well. So sports radio just seemed like the perfect combination between my interests.
I love that. I love that. You know,
Yeah.
you had just mentioned, sorry, Troy, if I cut you off. You had just mentioned um, the internship you did, Beats by Dre and Universal Music. And you really, if you look at the bio, you had a lot of those very cool opportunities, both in music and, excuse me, in music and sport, with high profile organizations, well-known high profile organizations. How, for so many of our students that want to chase these internships, these opportunities, these fellowships, like, how did you secure those things? How did you get exposed to those opportunities?
Being a student helped a lot. A lot of these big organizations, they want students. They want like college students. They have programs particularly cut out specifically for people in school pursuing those industries. And so looking up like specific grants or specific scholarships, specific programs that these organizations sponsor, like Universal Music Group has a really healthy college internship program, and they really are adamant on recruiting students. And so getting involved in that student network, I think expanded a lot of my opportunities because a lot of these organizations, they target the students and then they go on to have the students work for them after they graduate. So getting that groundwork level in of being tapped into these scholarship programs and these grant programs, I think helped a lot. Also, it tied back to relationships as well. So if you know someone who works at that organization, seeing if you have like, do you need an assistant, or seeing like what bottom level roles that you can start up and build your way up, that helps a lot as well.
Outstanding.
That's great.
Yes, yes. Sure about the poem. I do. I just
So
don't know if
that
I
was going to be
have
my
it
next question, actually.
memorized.
Yeah, well, you don't have it
How
memorized.
did
You
your
can read.
passion?
We won't judge you for
Or
reading.
even written down. Like for example, I think you mentioned earlier the Washington Wizards. So that was really cool because I actually know someone who works with the marketing of the Washington Wizards, and she knew I was a poet, and she was like, I have this coolest idea. I think it was Juneteenth, the holiday, and she wanted to do a poem for Juneteenth for the Wizards. So I was able to go to like the National African American Museum Library, and that's where we filmed it on top of there. It's like this gorgeous rooftop in DC. And I wrote a poem just honoring the history of Juneteenth and DC, and specifically, DC is a very culturally rich city. And so tapping into that was really cool. And then I started college in DC. I started at Howard. So just taking little aspects of the community that I had noticed when I lived there, that was really cool as well. And I was able to make this really cool poem for the Wizards, and they shared it for
What's great is it's
Juneteenth.
on YouTube, so I think I can share my screen. Would that
It
is
is
that
you
is that
too.
acceptable? Hold on, let's do. I think I just found it.
Oh, that's crazy.
Hold on here. This is, see, with for all the students and careers in sports, the one thing you guys don't get that the poets did get is you would get embarrassed all the time because you would get asked to perform on a whim. So, all right, hold on. Let me share my screen. Let's do, I think this. And do I have to share audio? Will it do it? Share. Can we
Yeah, sure.
see the screen?
Yeah.
All right.
I
And
can
Yep.
see
oh,
it.
I lost it and I got too many things going on. Hold on. There it is. And now we got to get volume.
Here, freedom sounds like sneakers lacing, players chasing, players racing to make race a fact and not a fault, removing salt from this country's wounds, each dribble, driving home a point proven the 19th of June when we started warming up to a new revolutionary tune. Everybody is welcome on this home court. Inclusion be the fight song of this brown ball sport. Listen to the sweet sounds of liberation, the swishes and the squeaks, the understanding of a team who moves as one without even having to speak. Some call it impossible. Or maybe it's just a little wizardry, banking on shots thought to be impractical, amending acts thought to be irreversible, showing crowds that everybody shoots for the stars the same way. Everybody plays the same come game day. All it takes is a little more free in your throat, a little adjustment to the status quo. and the rest is nothing but net.
All right.
Wow.
That's what we do. Snaps.
I got
Snaps.
to give you that.
Outstanding.
So, how did your passion develop for the spoken word?
I have always loved writing. I used to thought I was going to be a little author. And it was actually at Cypress Bay in my creative writing class. Mrs. Herring, my teacher, love her. She introduced me to her spoken word club. And that changed a lot because it allowed me to have a little more fun and play with the rhythm in my writing. So I used to be like this really long-winded writer, but poetry helped me have fun and like actually use my voice as a tool as well and let loose a little bit when it came to my writing, which was really cool. And then the performing aspect was a whole different thing because it allowed me to I don't know, just speak up about topics that I was interested in or speak up about topics that were on my mind. And I will say that spoken word poetry has been really cool, even in the sports industry, because when I was looking for a job, after I graduated, before I got the serious role, I actually was interviewing for a Portland Trailblazers role. And they were just absolutely in love with the idea of poetry in sports. And I remember at that point, I actually had worked with Seth a lot with the Fish Tank, and which was the Miami Dolphins podcast. And I did these really cool poetry recaps of the Miami Dolphins games. And I think this was 2023. And if you remember that season of the Dolphins, it was a really good season. So I was able to make a lot of really good poems based off of the viral moments from those games. And I used that on my resume. And the Trailblazers, they thought that that was the coolest thing in the world. And they wanted to bring that into their organization. So it was really cool how that hobby of mine was able to translate into something that other sports organizations actually wanted to incorporate into their world as well, because it was just a totally different way of storytelling that kind of bended the rules a bit and related to the culture in a way that other storytelling doesn't do.
So as I'm hearing you say that, and I even saw, or I think you posted something on Instagram where one of the hosts was trying to learn about who you were when you joined as a producer, and so they like
Yes.
Googled you, and then all these spoken word poems came up, and they were like, "Holy crud! Like this is unbelievable." And
Yes.
so, do you see a world? So this is two parts. I think it's important for our students to hear it because you mentioned it earlier that they might have these skill sets that end up being really valuable in some aspect of working in a job in sport. And so I think that our students is kind of a challenge to you all to think about what are the unique things that you do that may not directly tie to sport, but somehow could be woven into sport and could make you stand out in the way that Nyah had that opportunity with the Portland Trailblazers or the Wizards. But do you see a world where spoken word and your current career trajectory in sports might intersect again?
I actually can. I don't see it in the super near future, but it is something that I've been thinking about because like you've said, the host did see my poems and he is not like every time I work with him, he brings it up. Like she's a poet. So stuff like that. And I do think that poetry ties into your broadcasting and just speaking abilities as well. So I can see that as a possibility, just because it goes back to having a unique way to tell sports stories. I feel like we have a lot of sports content and a lot of it can sound the same. So maybe if there's like poetry sports recaps, it could just twist up the way that people ingest things and then also bring new audiences in. I think that something like poetry and sports could bring in poetry listeners who may know nothing about sports but love poetry so that they can learn something new. So I could see it. I could see it
I
happening.
think there's a podcast in the making. That's what
Hey, just might be.
I think there's a
Just might
podcast in the
be.
making. Are there any more questions for Nyah? I'm looking here at the chat. So whether you want to just say it here from your classroom, or if you guys want to put it in the chat, please feel free to take advantage of this opportunity because we've got just a few more minutes here. And just because I played that poem doesn't mean that you can't share another one if you have one sitting in
No, it's perfect. I can't top that. I can't top
your certainly not with the editing.
that.
Troy, did you have anything else on your list?
Um, I think one last question about mentorships and internships. How important are they, and then how much experience did you take from those mentorships and internships?
Internships are very important, and I know that everyone says that, but I did not realize how important they were until I was graduated from college looking for a job. And you go back to all those internships, and they not only remind you of what you actually like doing, so pay attention when you do get an internship. Imagine if this was your job. Would you actually like waking up and doing this every day? And pay attention to the work culture, how they treat you as an intern. Just imagine if this is something that you'd like to continue doing. And then also those relationships that you form during internships are so, so, so key. I remember after I did my internship at Sirius, I applied for this full-time position probably a couple months later, so let's say like January, and I did not hear anything back for months. And it wasn't until May that I finally thought, okay, maybe I should reach out to my old internship boss, and he pulled strings around, and I think he really got the ball in motion and rolling for me to get the current position that I have now. So, and then even just the relationships I formed with the producers at the time, having them to have my back when I did start working full time here meant a lot. It really did. So just having that familiarity during internships, if you do, as long as you do a pretty good job, a decent job, then they'll remember you and they will be more inclined to help you out in the future. If you decide you want to go back there, or if you decide that this isn't for you, at least you had that practice run and you can say that you tried it and it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah, I can tell you also if you do a if you do a horrifically lousy job, they remember you as well. So
They will.
you want to leave your mark, but not that way. Okay, looks like we have one more question from
One
Hollywood
more
Hills.
question.
That's actually a good one. Did you have to relocate to work for SiriusXM, or did you already live near the studio?
No, I had to relocate. So I'm from Florida. I graduated from Tallahassee. I went back home for a little bit in Weston when I was graduated, but this full-time position is in New York. So I had to move from Florida to New York, which was a whole process. I would say definitely keep that in mind as well when you're looking for a job. Think about the city where you're moving. Thank goodness I had a little bit of family here, that helped that move transition, but it definitely is a different way of life. And then just even like the commute to work, where you're going to live, it all factors in to the job that you're going to take now. So yes, I did have to relocate to New York, but I prefer being here versus maybe still being in Florida and being remote, because that in studio experience that you get and just being in New York in the entertainment business is valuable. So just the little interactions that I have every day, I think that makes my job 10 times more fun being in the mix of it actually here in New York.
Awesome.
I will say.
Troy, I think I'm good on my end.
Yeah, I think I'm good on my end too. Naya, thank you very much for coming on and doing our careers in sports, our virtual speaker series. We truly, truly appreciate you. Anytime you ever want to come back, you're more than welcome. And anytime you ever want to share a poem with our students, you're definitely more than welcome to come back and do that as well.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. And thank y'all for listening. I appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, just let me know. Hit me up. Find me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome. All right,
Thank
round
you
of
very much.
applause all across
Oh.
Broward. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you again
Thank
here,
you.
hopefully after winter break, right? Happy holidays to everyone. And we'll have another speaker series session. That's
Take care.
awesome. Bye-bye. Take
Well,
care.
goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Let me stop it.